Therapist Thrival Guide, where we cover all of the things that graduate school didn't teach you.
Welcome to the Therapist Thrival Guide. My name is Miranda Barker. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and we have a bonus episode for you today. We actually have Jessica here from Mightier, and a couple weeks ago, we released an episode where we talked about technology in mental health treatment and therapy, and we mentioned Mightier. And so this is something that I wanted to learn a little bit more about, and the folks at Mightier were super gracious in letting us borrow Jessica. So Jessica, I'm hoping you can just kind of jump right in, introduce yourself, and kind of share a little bit about your job at Mightier.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me. This is super exciting. Also very excited to hear about like your podcast in general and like really cool. Yeah. So, my background is also in clinical social work. I have been working with Mightier for about 6 years now. My work at Mightier is not, I would say, like the typical therapeutic social worky job that I expected to have when I was in grad school and when I first started my career. I used to work in schools and in inpatient psychiatry. Those were like my main experiences before coming to Mightier. My current role at Mightier is actually, it's a mix of a lot of different things. So a lot of like clinical curriculum development, and what that means for us, it might mean writing something, it might mean creating activities, but since Mightier is so play-based and built around games, it actually means taking these therapeutic concepts and these competencies that we really want kids and families developing and turning those into games. So working with our game design team around like, what does that look like? How can we make this fun? How can we make this more engaging? Talk a lot with the families who use our program, which I think is like my favorite part of my job, just like getting to know them, hearing their stories, getting to know their kids. That's a lot of what I do right now.
Okay, this is so cool. So a lot of what you do is transforming therapeutic concepts into games.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about, well, let's maybe take a step back. And for people who haven't listened to the episode yet, do you want to share a little bit about what Mightier is and how it works?
Yeah, definitely. So Mightier is a biofeedback video game platform, basically. So kids wear a heart rate monitor as they play. And then, Mightier is an app, but like they can play on a tablet, and as they play, they play a bunch of different games, right? And there's sort of this meta game built around whatever individual game they're playing. There are things to collect, worlds to discover, problems to solve, things like this. But their heart rate is always layered on top of whatever they're doing in the game world. So what this means is that they see what's happening with their heart rate at all times. We have something we call the gizmo, and it's just the visual for your heart rate, and it lives right on the screen. So when you're calm, you can see that you're in your blue zone. Everything functions normally within your gameplay experience. And when your heart rate goes up, because maybe you're really excited about something, or you're getting a little frustrated or a little angry, or your sibling walks in and starts distracting you and they're bothering you, your heart rate will go up. It will go up into the red. And when you go into the red, the game changes a little bit. There's a lot of visual messaging to let you know, like, hey, you're going into the red zone. Because we know that like that would be hard for a lot of kids to understand, like, what's happening here. I'm so invested in my gameplay. And then the goal is to bring your heart rate back down to the blue. And kids can do this however they want. They can practice different calming strategies that Mightier actually teaches and gets kids to engage with. They can really get back down to blue however they want. And when they do, they earn different like rewards for it. So the whole game system is actually built around emotional regulation practice as being part of the game. So that's really like ingrained and embedded in there. And so one, it makes that fun. Two, it gives kids a way to practice that in a way that we actually don't really offer in other therapeutic settings. Like, it is a hard thing to just like practice in real time, right? We can talk about how we feel. We can talk about calming strategies. We can talk about coping skills, but then to really practice that in a way that when you're in real life and your body remembers how to respond to anxiety, to frustration, that's a different thing. So Mightier actually helps kids learn these skills in a more ingrained way. It's kind of like muscle memory. in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
So is the goal, this was something that kind of came up during our podcast episode too, but is the goal being able to last as long as you can in the game without having your heart rate go up? Or is it more so just to kind of bring yourself back down when it does go up?
Yeah, so it's actually, it can kind of work in a few different ways. There are lots of ways to successfully engage with Mightier. If you stay blue, so if that whole time you're playing, you're like, no, I'm going to keep my heart rate down. I'm going to keep my heart rate down. Great. Like your gameplay stays, the way it is. You're getting lots of good practice, maintaining that sense of calm. Or if your heart rate goes up and then you bring it back down, you earn rewards for bringing it back down. So you're getting that practice. And actually some kids get their heart rate up on purpose and then bring it back down to get, to get the rewards attached to that. And for us, it's a lot about letting kids explore and experiment and really discover like, whoa, this is how my body works. This is how my heart rate works. I have this direct feedback right there on the, within Mightier in the moment. I can see how I can control this, which is a really cool thing because it's different for all of us. And I think for kids to experience that firsthand and really get this sense of like ownership over that process is really important. So not very many wrong ways to play at all. And like lots of like really cool pathways kids can take that like let them discover their emotions, their heart rate, and that level of control in different ways.
Yeah, this is so cool. I had heard about Mightier because a psychiatrist that we work with was like, have you heard of this game? This is something that clients that I'm seeing have mentioned to me and that they love. And so it's really cool just to kind of hear some of the why behind how this works. Is there like one game that is like the Mightier game, or are there lots of games? You said it's within an app.
Yeah. So I think the best way to describe it is there's like a game library. So we have our like Mightier universe that you interact with, but within that there are different games that you can play.
Okay. Yeah.
I think at this point there are like 26, maybe 27 different games within that library that you can play. And part of the reason for that is just that all kids have different game preferences. So, we have games that are better for maybe a 6-year-old who doesn't have a ton of experience with video games and needs something that doesn't have time pressure attached to it, or like the movements are a little simpler, versus a 10-year-old who has like a lot of video game experience or needs something a little more strategic or fast paced, or, really enjoys those quick reaction times as they play video games. So just a variety for that reason.
Okay. Yeah. So what age range is best for Mightier, or like that you guys would recommend?
Yeah. So our trials are around age 6 to 14. And theoretically, this process of like, you're aware, you build emotional awareness because you think about your heart rate, and then you practice emotional regulation over and over and over again. Like that theoretically could work for anyone, but our games are designed for ages kids 6 to 14. We do have younger players, I'd say like 4.5 and 5-year-olds who do play, and they actually are really successful with it. They usually just need they need their parent playing with them to help them figure it out. But
Are any of them multiplayer, or is it all single player games?
All single player right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious when you said the parent.
Yeah. So when you set up an account within Mightier, you can have different players on that, right? So different people in the family can each have their own player account, but they can't play like directly against each other.
That makes sense. Okay, sure. So what type of diagnoses or like kind of problems or things that is this game really designed to treat or to help?
Yeah. So Mightier works for emotional regulation at the core of it. Like that is what it's built to help with. About 50%, because when families sign up, we ask them like, what are you here for? What is your child struggling with? About 50% of kids who sign up for Mightier have no diagnosis at all, but they are struggling with frustration, anger, irritability. They have meltdowns, they have outbursts. Those things are happening in their home. And then on the other side of it, for kids who do carry a diagnosis, at this point, actually probably 45% of kids have an ADHD diagnosis. I want to say I think 13% of our users right now have an autism diagnosis. A good chunk of kids with ODD as well. So some of these diagnoses that part of what the diagnosis means is that emotional regulation is also difficult, right? So if we think about ADHD and how impulse control in an academic setting matters, it also impacts your ability to regulate your emotions, things like that. So, yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about some of the research that you guys are seeing behind Mightier and how helpful it can be for families and for kids.
Yeah. So our initial research started back in 2010 out of Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. And back then we were doing double-blinded, sham, randomized control trials, but they were sham control trials. So some of the kids it was a very early prototype version basically of what Mightier is now. But the kids playing the games, they didn't know, whether or not this was actually hooked up to their heart rate. So we did a number of trials at Boston Children's in the outpatient department and on the inpatient units. Did some work with Mass General Hospital as well. So in those early trials, we were really looking at the symptoms and sort of measuring. Kids would play for 12 weeks, 45 minutes a week for 12 weeks is all that they were playing. And then we would do these pre and post measures that would sort of get at these levels of irritability, aggression, anger, frustration. And it was this mix of clinicians working with them and parent report of these symptoms.
Oh, sure.
So saw really great results there. So significant different, so parents saying yes, this is actually making a meaningful difference in our life and in our home, and statistically significant differences as well between the two groups. And since then we've had we have a research team at Mightier. So we try to, have things going at all times. So, and at this point, our program is very home-based. It is built for families to use in their homes, not attached to therapy or anything like that, right? So we do get measures from parents as well as to what they're noticing in terms of changes for their child and improvements. So that data shows us that after about around 3 months of play, about 87% of families are saying yeah, this has made a difference for my child. My child is doing better with whatever the specific thing they were struggling with.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's really cool. Yeah. And it's so much about, it's so much just about the practice, right? You're just getting your practice in. If you were to practice deep breathing 45 minutes a week, it'd be so calm. But, yeah. And we have, I think our next biggest study, we have an ongoing study right now with the National Institute of Mental Health. And so again, we're looking at clinical improvements, but also we're going to follow these kids for a year afterwards and see what's happening in terms of their healthcare claims.
Interesting.
Yeah. So sort of to see okay, is Mightier making a big enough difference that actually your healthcare provider is spending less overall on your care. So we'll see. We still have at least a year probably in that study.
Yeah. So I feel I have so many questions. This is so good. First question, do parents get to see kind of is there a parent side of Mightier where they can kind of see the improvement or see reports generated or anything like that?
Yeah. So we have a parent app. So, and it's sort of, I'm tempted to pull it up on my phone right now, but I don't think it would actually show very well. So within that, it's sort of your companion app. So you can see how much your child's playing and a little bit of the data around their play, how many times they're cooling down. That's our big measure of how much practice your child's getting. Like they brought their heart rate down this many times total.
Does it also track like how long it takes them to get their heart rate down?
We have that data actually on our side. I don't believe that is in the parent app right now.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah.
And just being able to see that go down over time,
Right.
like if able, yeah, okay.
Yeah. One thing that is tricky about that is the system adjusts with kids. So when kids first start playing, it takes this baseline, right? So it's figuring out, all right, based on the heart rate data I'm getting from this player, this is what their blue zone should be. Like this is when they are calm, and therefore this is what their red zone should be. But as kids practice more, as their emotional regulation abilities improve, like we need to adjust that blue and red zone on our end so that they still get the challenge.
Yeah.
So kids can't see the difference, but also that impacts, it makes the data a little wonky to look at because like things are moving on the back end as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So theoretically, could a kid like download Mightier and just like play through it and just like blow through it right away? And or do you mentioned like kind of 45 minutes a week, or is there like a secret interval that you guys kind of recommend that parents put parameters around their kids' use?
Yeah, we always recommend 45 minutes a week. A lot of families break that down in different ways. A lot of families do like 15-minute play sessions like 3 times a week. So that's what we say, like, that's where you're going to see results, because this is about the practice. This is about the muscle memory in a sense. So you need to get that in. It's flexible. Lots of families, like, they go on vacation. They're not going to meet that 45 minutes a week. No big deal. And then there are a lot of kids who play lots more than that. And that's sort of just up to the family, whether or not that works for them, and if they're comfortable with their child playing more. Because in the end, it means more practice. So lots of flexibility around that. But there is a lot of content on there, and like each game has multiple levels. There are characters to collect. We have these characters called lovelings. They have different like personalities and like little bios about them. And you have to cool them down and collect them. Like there's a lot of stuff. There's point systems, levels to go up. So it would take a child a long while, I think, to like go through all of that. So, yeah,
that makes sense. So, gosh, I'm trying to think if I have any other main questions. So you said families, you guys recommend 45 minutes a week for like 12 weeks or like 3 months. Do you see families doing it for longer than that usually and see like more results? I mean, are you?
Yeah. So actually we always recommend like give it it's going to take at least 3 months for you to start noticing changes. Sure. Because of that part about the practice and like that muscle memory and habit formation. Part of what I used to do with Mightier years ago was just, I talked a lot with our families all the time. And it was really around that 2 to 3 month mark was when I first started hearing parents say like, something feels different. Like my child might not be intentionally taking a deep breath in real life, but like they're a little less reactive, or their frustration tolerance has improved a little bit. Like I'm noticing these things about there's something internal that has shifted. But that takes a couple months to start showing up. So our plans are built out around like you could sign up monthly, or you could do 6 months, you could do a year, and really just like give it that time and get that good practice in.
Are you guys headed towards or like working towards getting like insurance reimbursement or anything like that in the future, or is it really just kind of sticking to the self-pay like subscription method at this point?
We're trying for insurance. We're trying to figure out how we fit into like the billing and coding system. That NIH study I talked about that will be very powerful, I think, for us on the insurance side. So we are working within that. There are we've done this in a few states so far, but there are some like waiver programs or like reimbursement programs that different states have where, you know, your insurance might not cover it right away, but like you can get that reimbursement from Mightier. Or if your state has already signed up with us for this waiver program, like you can access Mightier that way through those funds. So we've started exploring that in different states to make it easier for people to access Mightier.
Very cool. Are you seeing any like school districts or therapy clinics or kind of places outside of the home use Mightier?
Yeah, definitely. So I actually, this is where I love, like, people are so creative and they like figure out how to make it work, because our program right now, it's designed for family use, but it is very easily usable in a clinic, in your therapy session, in the classroom, in a counseling session in school. Like, and so so schools, counselors, therapists, like they find us all the time and are figuring out just how to integrate it into their different settings.
Oh, that's so cool. And then they would be able to access those reports kind of like how the parent could.
Yeah. They could download that parent app. There are also like resources. We try to pad our program with a lot of other things as well outside of that purely like child is playing Mightier on the app experience. We have, actually I can show you this. We have something we're calling skill packs, and it kind of like explores a little more of like social emotional themes, and like these would, you know, you'd get one of these every month, right? And these are our characters, Loblings. Like this is Lexi, and like Lexi has a little bio. There are different activities, like educational pieces in here. This is a craft, like you actually cut this out, you make this in your home. So we make one of these that you have access to every month. And then a lot of other like resources and activities that you can access either through the parent app or like through our site, or we might send it to you in the newsletter, that try to do this more holistic approach, I guess.
Yeah. Involve the parents, involve the other people. I love it. Oh, this is so cool, Jessica. Can you think of anything else that I forgot to ask, or anything that we're missing?
Well, one thing I like to talk about that is, and it's not going to be like revolutionary because I've alluded to it a lot, but this idea of like learning through play is something we really believe in. We really try to embody like in all of our approaches with kids and all of our experiences that we give to kids and families. We're really like jazzed up about it also because it's so, I don't know, it's a different approach to mental health in general. I think for a lot of kids, they, like we hear a lot of families who, you know, by the time they get to Mightier, they're like, my kid just has a hard time like we try to talk about emotions, like we try to talk about coping skills, like this is hard, like it's so we really try to like bring the play aspect in, because it is one for engagement, but also it's so meaningful for kids as well.
And it's how kids learn, how they engage. I mean, I can't think of a better way to be teaching some of these skills, and this is awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. I will include a link to the Mightier products in the description of this video or the audio, wherever you're listening to this. But thank you so much, Jessica. I really appreciate you joining and sharing more about this amazing tool. This is so cool.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great.